number one source, Sports Card Nation. The hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
Everybody, welcome to episode 383 of Sports Card Nation. And just got back from Florida. Was there 8 days in the Disney World. Me and my wife, I don't want to call it a second honeymoon, but that's where we went on our first honeymoon. I don't even think we went for 8 days when we did it the first time. So I guess you could call it a second honeymoon. Great weather, 80 degrees, not even too hot. Had a little breeze, sun, very little rain, and enjoyed all the parks and spending time together. Much needed sort of husband-wife trip, if you will. Here's the problem. I got back. When I got on the plane in Orlando, it was 86. When I got off the plane in Syracuse, it was 46. So I lost 40 degrees. I lost definitely a lot of sun, and I got a cold. So dealing with that, but fighting through it. We'll be all right. And I have a great guest on today's show. And, 8 out of 10 times the guest, before I have someone on the show, I generally know them in some form or capacity. Not all the time. And this is one of those cases where it's not all the time. I did not know my guest, Adam Romero of Romero Sports Card, but I read, I can't even remember where I read where he did a little mini interview with a card publication. And very interesting guy, kind of a man that wears some different hats. He was a law enforcement officer who gave that up, retired from that to go full-time in cards. Probably a little safer, definitely, I'd say. And I love, you know me, I've said it before, right? When someone takes the deep dive into going full-time, I love to know the dynamics and the dichotomy of that. And so when I read the little article and interview with him in written form, I'm like, I got to have this gentleman on the show. And so that's the case today, and next week will be part 2. But Adam Romero, very interesting guy, great guy, doing some stuff and doing it quickly. That's, I think, to me, sort of the amazing part is how fast he's getting stuff done. And I don't want to give that away. We'll save that for the interview itself. But as always, we thank our sponsors, Iron Sports Cards, Sports Collectors Digest, Hobby Hotline, and Upper Deck. So without further ado, let's get the show started. All right, real excited to talk to my next guest on the Sports Card Nation guest line. He, like myself, he's a man of many hats, hobby and outside the hobby. And I'll full disclosure, I had never met him. I just read an article about him. Super interesting guy. And I said, man, these are the, what we like, people we like to talk to on this program. I'm like, he checks all those boxes and then some. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Adam Romero from Captain Romero Sports Card. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. It's nice to meet you, and I'm very excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Well, Adam, I know it's kind of the standard fare on a lot of podcasts, especially the first time someone's on. Kind of the like, well, for you, when did the hobby start? Like, take us back to the beginning. Did it all begin?
Yeah, like a lot of people, just right when COVID started. Basically, when everything was shut down, nobody knew what was going on and kind of figuring out what to do, cooped up at the job at home. And then someone just kind of said, hey, you're so into sports, but have you ever gave sports cards a thought? And I knew the sports cards existed, but I didn't know that there was a business or a financial way about it during that time. And it literally, once I got started in it, it was just one door led to another, and it just kind of got me to where I'm at today. But basically the general gist is COVID, and it just took off from there.
How like did you get like where did you start? Like did you say I mean you didn't become obviously you didn't become a dealer right away. You had to get into like build an inventory. So what did you target? Was it favorite teams, favorite players, just people athletes performing well? Like where did you start?
So basically, I was kind of one of the guys. Now I didn't go as too crazy as camping out at Walmart's or Targets, but I was. It was during that time where packs and blasters and megas were selling for astronomical prices. So I kind of when I started getting in, it was kind of buying the boxes at Walmart, and I was ripping them all. Didn't matter what product. I didn't know what a parallel was. I didn't know what that there was numbered and autos. I was just ripping cards, looking them all up on eBay, and then the ones that were doing pretty decent, I would sell them. And then it kind of transferred into, well, I saw what the boxes were selling for sealed. So after I ripped a lot of boxes, I started selling the boxes. And then again, this was during COVID, so a lot of things were inflated during that time. But again, it went from ripping to, or I'm sorry, it went from ripping to then selling the boxes. Then I learned about grading. So then I started grading cards. And that was back, I remember to this day, I sold a Donruss base paper of Mac Jones. And during that year, and I sold it for like $60. And to me, I was just like, one card, $60. Like there's this business side to it. Then that led to the next step and led to the next step. And then of course, dealing, vending, local shows, then bigger shows, then bigger shows and bigger shows, then taking up all my weekends. And then I was a cop at the time. So I was like then adjusting and using PTO to go to shows. And again, then it led to kind of what I do now as I vend all over the country. And then I have 5 shows of my own that I run on the East Coast.
Yeah, that's amazing. From that first pack you ripped to the first show you set up as a vendor, like how long was that? What was
Man, I want to say probably 6 months. I didn't know that card shows existed. I didn't know what they were. It was literally, I was learning on the fly. Every week I was learning something new about all this stuff. And finally I found a show that for years apparently was down the road for me, 15 minutes down the road. And finally I kept trying to get into that show and message the promoter. And for the first few months, they were just sold out. Finally, I got in there, and then I did my first show. I think I sold like 2 cards, but I didn't give up. I just got drawn in and liked it. I was doing the eBay. I was doing stuff. I kind of started the Instagram, and every time it seemed like every week I did something new within the hobby. It was create a logo, create an Instagram. There's stuff on Twitter and there's stuff on Facebook and then TikTok. And there was all these avenues that it was so much information that I was just taking in really weekly. But I think it's about 6 months before I did just bought my first pack and looked at sports cards to when I set up.
Now you mentioned being a sports fan. A lot of the stories we hear, Adam, are, hey, I collected as a kid. And then, I got out and then I came back. You didn't even collect as a kid. Like you're kind of or am I wrong?
No. So I had sports cards as a kid, just randomly. It was not something that I was like going to a store or my local shop. It was just like here and there packs. Yeah, I was very much a sports fanatic. I grew up in New York. So like I went to Yankees games all the time. I went, followed the Knicks, and I was very athletic. So I played all kinds of sports at school. And then sports cards were never a priority or a thing. I probably looked at comics and Marvel stuff more back then than I did sports cards. And then that there was a huge gap where I never even heard about sports cards through my teenage and young adult years. And it wasn't until COVID that I was just kind of introduced to, there's sports cards and there's this, to me, what was like an underground of like, this is going on and this is happening and cards are selling for what? And you could do that. And there's shows all over. I would have never heard of a show until my first show. I didn't know that there was shows all over. So again, the same thing as I was learning each week, there was just new information coming in left and right about all. To me, it was just like a wow factor of like, all this has been going on for years, and I'm a very much sports person. How have I never heard of this?
How daunting was that, sort of to kind of come in almost cold, if you will, and then learn? Obviously, you learn on the fly, you learn quickly, like you said, each week. Did you have moments where you're like, what did I get myself into here? Like, my nuts?
No, I didn't feel that. What I felt was nuts was, and I'm not trying to brag here, but like I was very shocked at how successful I was doing this as a side piece very quickly. And it was overwhelming in a good way, because I was like, all these cards were selling on eBay, and then I learned about grading, and I was getting good at that, and then going to shows and having the right image. It was overwhelming in a positive way. But then again, too, a lot of this was COVID, so there was a recorrection of the market and kind of how things were. And back then, it was cool and profitable to grade base cards. Now, not so much. And then like again, population counts and learning parallels. And when I started to learn products like Optic and Prism are kind of the top of the line, opposed to I was buying all these other Score and Rookies and Stars, and it's kind of like, hey, people don't really want that stuff too much. So again, there was, like I've already said, learning every week, and then this and that, then knowing what to buy, and then getting good in that space. That was the overwhelming part of like, wow, there's a lot to learn, but I'm also like just doing well. And then I eventually got to that point where I was like, I think I might want to do this full time.
Yeah, so here's my thing. You mentioned grading. We'll get to the full. I definitely want to touch on the full time thing. I remember when I first started grading cards. It was a long time ago. I'm old, Adam. So one of the mistakes I made was, I don't do it anymore, but as a new person reading at the time, I would look at my cards and sort of give myself a pass, where a grading company or grader isn't going to do that. So I'd look at it, that's a little thing, no big deal. They won't care about that too much. How was that like when you first started grading? Did you fall in any of those pratfalls, or not? Not really. You kind of did your homework before you submitted cards.
In the very beginning, like I'm talking the very like first few submissions, I really didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that like if I send my card off and it just gets a good grade, there's a profit margin there that seems to be the way to go. But it wasn't until a while that I believe that I got, okay, now I know what I'm actually looking for: corner, surface, this, that, and the other. Again, with the whole, like, there was that time of base cards for certain players were doing great, but then there was the autos, and then there's the thicker cards, and eights in certain cards are okay, but eights in other cards are not okay. And then factoring in your mailing, your wait time. And then during that time, PSA had just shut down. But then again, at that time, I didn't know that there was really a difference between PSA, BGS, SGC. I didn't know there was profit differential. Actually, the only one that was really taking submissions at that time was HGA. And I'm sure you're familiar with HGA. They did the color labels, and that was kind of popular at the moment. One, because they were the only ones taking one in, and then they had this new thing where they're like, we can color match your cards, and people in the beginning liked that. And then if you're familiar with HGA, they kind of went away now. But that was who I started with. I sent a ton of cards to HGA, and then they ended up getting shut down or paused. And man, I lost so much money because they kept my cards for like 8 months.
I wasn't a fan of them, Adam, because they would like misspell players' names on the flips, and just make a lot of mistakes like that. I'm like, how can I take them seriously if they can't even get they can't even spell the guy's name right, and then they're going to tell me what the card, like the condition of the card, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was my thing. They're the original owner. They've been sold like 2 or 3 times since, but the original owner, I'm trying to think of the word I would use, just sort of eccentric and a kind of a character, and was going all over the place doing interviews and just off the wall and kind of zany. And nope. These guys are, aren't going to make it. I hate like I'm not rooting against people, but it just
Right.
threw off that sort of vibe. And so early on, I thought they had a halfway decent idea with like the color matching of the flips. I just think they didn't get a lot of the other stuff right,
Yeah.
and it kind of hurt them in the end. I think they were purchased not once but even twice, and
Yeah.
not like you said. Now you don't need. I'm not even sure they
I don't
exist now.
think they've been operating for
Yeah.
like the
If
years.
let me put it this way, if they are at them, they can't be doing too well because no one's talking about them
No.
at this point anymore.
Someone's at my door. I've got to get that. Be right back.
Iron Sports Cards is your #1 source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
Sports Card Nation has returned.
Grading is when you first, for those who get into it at the start, it can be daunting. And I remember, back when I started, I would have a stack of 40 cards that were candidates, and I'd probably send in 36, 38 of them. And now if I start with a candidate stack of like 40 cards, I do two things. I do just the regular eye test with no magnification, and then eliminate some from that 40 just by, if I can see it with my naked eye, then you know what I mean. It's not a good candidate. And then so let's say that I go from 40 with the naked eye test to 28. Let's say then I have magnification like jeweler's glasses with the magnification flips down, and then I'll go through that 28 and eliminate what now, because they're going to look at it with 10 times 2. Might as well do the same thing they are. So from where I'm going with this is from that original stack of 40 cards, at the end, I may sub 18 cards, 20 cards after it passes the regular eye test and then magnification.
Right.
Where when I first started, I was literally sending everything and saying, whatever, they're not going to notice that, or they're not going to care about that. It was foolish, but you learn by trial and error. So
Correct.
I learned by a lot of errors. You mentioned, now you're full time. You were in law enforcement. Obviously, thank you for your service
thank you
your
very
community. Much. And obviously, it's a dangerous job, and there's dangers with it. How tough of a decision was it to give up that career to go to the hobby full time?
So in some ways, it was initially tough. So I wanted to be a cop basically from my teenage years up all the way up until I was an adult. And I started kind of late. I became a cop in my late 20s and went to the academy. There was a bunch of people that were like 19, 20 in the academy. And I think I was like 27 or something like that. But I went through it, and then it was a big personal achievement in my life because it was something that I wanted to do so bad. No cops in my family, no real friend. It was just something that I've always wanted to do. I grew up in New York. I watched cops on TV like all the time. In New York, cops were very personable back. Not that they're not now, but obviously it's a different time back then. But just the whole idea of being a cop and the action and the thrill. And I did that, and I finally accomplished that. And it got to a point where I started dabbling in the sports cards. There was COVID. My daughter had just turned 5, and she was going to be entering school. I didn't want to be the dad that missed things. And obviously I've missed dates and other things and just plans, and always, hey, I'm not going to be, it's obviously not the type of job that you could just be like, I'm not going to stay late tonight. No, that doesn't fly. So there was that. In my personal life, I was with someone at the time, and that was just, there was the writing on the wall that was ending. So all of that at that time, I was like, I really was at a point after doing just close to 10 years. I just wasn't happy where my career was going. And I'm not going to get into the political side, but there was a political side of, when you're in law enforcement and laws change and they're not helping you and benefiting you.
Yeah.
So what am I doing here? And not to say the cops are more important than anybody else, but there is a risk of putting your life every day. And I'm just like,
I'll say it for you. Adam. I know where you get. Like when a new law puts your life at more jeopardy than prior, right?
Oh.
That's not right, and it's something you got to think about.
That's
as
absolutely,
a dad, as a human.
yes.
You don't have to apologize for that. Like
a kind of an example without trying to make it political. When you arrest someone for a very serious crime and they are out on the street before you get back to your station, it's like, what am I doing here? Like, there's a lot of work that goes into taking that person and reports and evidence and time and interviews, and you take a person to jail, especially for some of these serious crimes, and then you get back an hour or two later, you have to face that family and say, hey, I didn't release them. I take them to jail, but then they're on the street walking beside their victims the very next hour or day. All that put together, that's when I was taking PTO to go to card shows and doing. I'll tell you a funny story, and this was all the time. As I was doing so well with eBay, I was taking a tote to work every day full of all my sports cards, graded, wax, everything. And I put it in the back of my patrol car because I was selling so much that I was like, I want to keep my rating high and my shipping right. So I would ship throughout the day and stop at the post office, and I'd have a big tote of cards in my back. Sometimes I'd arrest people. Before I put them in the car, I'd be like, hey, let me move on. So I'd move.
I'm laughing because you could be arresting someone for theft. They're a thief, and there you got your inventory, like potentially. Obviously, like you said, you moved it out, but
yeah. Let me move it over. They sit down, and a lot of them will be like, well, what's all this stuff? And I'll be like, oh, it's just stuff. I'm talking to them while taking them to jail. Like, you know what, my grandpa. Or they'd be like, oh, my grandpa has all this stuff here. Maybe I'll call you. I'm like, well, no, I would not going to do business with you. But it did generate some fun conversations. But that's how serious I was. I had a house. I have a daughter. And I'm just like, can I really leave a sure thing, a sure paycheck, medical, and sell sports cards full time? It was nuts. There was many days that I was driving to work, coming home, and thinking about it, like, because it wasn't something I did a whim. It took months and months to see the result of my end financially to say, hey, can I do this full time and leave this? I've invested in a pension. I've wanted to be a cop the whole time, forever, and I'm just gonna now, maybe I was like a year into it. I'm just gonna do sports cards, and I was like, yeah. And then I opened up a store in my town, a retail store. So I kind of went all in and didn't look back. And for a few months, I was running my retail store while being a cop full time. So again, the cop, my life direction changes, my daughter, everything went into doing that. And very quickly, I was just happy in my soul. And so although there was fear at the initial part, it very quickly went away once I had this like monkey off my back that I'm like, no, I'm just following my heart, whether the numbers are a little bit less than when I was making a cop or more. If I could just be happy, that meant a lot more than the actual zeros on the paycheck.
Yeah, no doubt. You only live once, right? I will say this I want to jinx nothing. The hobby's a little bit a safer profession, I think it's safe to say, when compared to law enforcement. And so at first you were still working as a law enforcement officer and had a store. Talk about how did you and your dad, how did you balance all that out? How difficult was that?
Yeah, it was difficult, but I have sleep apnea and insomnia that I got from the military. And so I get very little sleep still to this day. And there was times where I would, if I worked a 5 to 5, I would come home at 5 a.m., try to sleep till maybe 9, get up, open my store at 10, run the store from 10 to 4, and then drive to the town that I worked in. And there was many days ago. There were some days where I had court. So I would get off at 5 a.m., run to court, which was about 20 minutes from the town that I worked in. Then I wouldn't get home till 9 a.m. I either just stayed up or I snoozed and then went and ran my store. So there was sometimes that I was going 24 hours without sleep, straight into, which is
Wow.
probably not what people wanted to hear, or some people would want to hear. But it again, you got to do what you got to do when you're chasing your dream or something like that. And I did that quite a bit.
So I got to ask this question,
Yeah.
that's how my mind works. Did anyone ever come into your retail establishment that you had familiarity with on the law enforcement side? Maybe not of the good variety. Did your paths ever cross in that fashion? Or
Yes.
not?
So at that time, the place that I worked for, first of all, I got a take-home car. So a lot of the times I just drove home to my house, and then I would drive from my house to the shop, work till I closed my shop, and then drive from my shop to work. So a lot of the times my patrol car was there in the lot. And then in my town that we live in, we have a Walmart or Super Walmart, where the town that I worked in, there wasn't a Super Walmart. So a lot of people from where I worked came to the Walmart in that area, and then they would come to the sports card shop. So yes, I did run into a variety of people that I've met along the way in my law enforcement journey, good and bad.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. And especially depending on the size of the city or town, maybe it's more likely even to happen. So, you have the store. When did the store make it easier kind of to leave law enforcement?
Yes, because I was like, in my head, I was like, how long could I keep this up doing a store almost full time, a police officer full time, and a dad, house, family chores, all that stuff, and no sleep? That even though I was used to it, I know it's not good for you. So that vision of, hey, doing the store and doing more shows, that made it easier to say, yes, this is my plan and what I can do, and here's the hope and the vision. But again, the happiness was something at that time that I hadn't felt for a long time, and that was kind of the driving force. I was like, if this fails, I'll just be happy that I tried something, and I'll have to go into something else. But I wasn't happy, and that was like the biggest driving force.
Yeah, I love hearing you say that, Adam, because 5 years ago, I made a career change in the teaching profession. Wish I had done it sooner, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But I was at a job where I was working 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., long days, just miserable after work, to the point my wife would be like, this job has made you like a miserable person. It's making you unhealthy, blah, blah, blah. And that's when I finally put out the stuff that I needed to kind of get into the teaching. What, again, should have done it sooner, in hindsight being 2020. But hearing you talk about that, I fully get it 100%. It makes all the sense to me. And you can't, while I may make a little bit less with my 9-to-5 job, the healthiness and the looking forward to going to work, you can't put a price. You can't put a price on that, right?
Absolutely priceless. And still to this day, I like, a lot of people ask me all the time, like, hey, because they know how much I loved law enforcement initially, and I was really good at it, and they're just like, any regrets? And I'm like, 0%, not 1 second for 1 day do I regret making a change.
Yeah, well, good for you, and I think that's great when you hear stories, and I'm sure you get to even spend more time, like you said, with your daughter as well. Awesome chopping it up with Adam there. Really cool dude. I haven't met him in person yet. Planning on doing that at the National. Again, this was part 1 of our 2-part conversation. So next episode, we will have the conclusion with Adam, and jumped in quick and didn't waste no time, right? He's a go-getter. He knows what to do. So he's got some big things coming that he shared off the air too. But we'll when those become official, we'll let you in on that. So again, come back next week for part 2. We're gonna hear from our Hobby is the People announcer of the week and wrap up this week's episode.
Time for our Hobby is the People announcer of the week.
What up, everybody? It's your boy, Cousin Oz, the People's Mailman. And along with Cousin Tony, the Architect, we are Cousins Collectibles. Make sure to check us out on the Cousins Collectibles podcast, as well as on Instagram at Cousins_Collectible. Before we get out of here, we wanted to remind you of a couple things.
First and foremost, remember, the hobby is the people.
And as always, keep focused, keep positive, and keep collecting.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People announcer of the week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.